who are going to be joining me today. My name is Evan Wiig. I'm the director of the Farmers Guild. We're a nonprofit based out of Sonoma County, though we operate statewide. So we advocate for new and young farmers, as well as what is called sustainable agriculture. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is that concept of sustainable agriculture. And typically, that notion really was kind of brought up by someone earlier today was talking about the evolution of the terminology and the lexicon of sustainability really having come from an environmentalist movement. And here in California, there's a long history of sort of a conflict between agriculture and environmentalists. Everything from the Delta smelt, which is a little tiny fish in the Delta of California that is probably the most politically contentious creature in America. Really, I mean, it's just incredible what has been has pit people against one another. And then you have things like the drought that has pitted agriculturalists, for instance, in the Central Valley against urbanites who want longer showers. It's that has been another big divisive topic. And then just here locally, we have issues. The recent closure of the Drakes Bay Oyster Company. That was another really strong, contentious battle that took place over a very long time. Kind of really strained some local communities around this issue. So the history has really shown environmentalists on one side and farmers on the other. In my personal own experience with farmers, I find that to be one of the most dangerous false dichotomies I have ever known. And I am lucky enough today to have with me three incredible examples of people who are bringing together a holistic vision for a truly regenerative partnership with the natural resources that we have here and food production, the real basis of our communities. Because the threat regarding sustainability and our food system is incredibly real. We have a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that's the result of runoff fertilizers, petroleum-based fertilizers and nitrates that have actually created hundreds squares of miles of uninhabitable water. We have Brazilian rainforests being torn down for more and more cattle grazing. We have a loss of topsoil. And meanwhile, we have a global food system that requires planes and trucks and all these gas-guzzling transportation operations all moving into the same areas all over the world. It really is I would say, an unsustainable system that we have right now. Meanwhile, agriculture here in California is struggling as well. The average age of the American farmer is almost 60. Here in Sonoma County, it has now surpassed 60, and that number keeps on going up. Since I've been talking, we've already lost 6 acres of farmland to development. That. Good call.
Correlation? Or?
Sorry about that, guys. But it is true. To development pressure, the lands that are productive that we have in agricultural use are continuing to be pushed out because it's more profitable to put up condominiums or to put up a strip mall or another shopping mall. It's incredibly challenging, especially here where you have the development pressures of San Francisco and the Bay Area. Meanwhile, we import the vast majority of our food. If it was not for instance, Straus and other dairy here in Sonoma County, really the vast majority of our food in Sonoma County is coming from other places. We have less than 600 acres in vegetable production in Sonoma County. Most people don't think about that. We think of Sonoma County as being this emblem of sustainability, a really incredible exemplar. But the truth is we have almost 70,000 acres in vineyard, which is great. I love my wine too. But if you were to divide the number of acres in vegetable production amongst the 500,000 people who live here in Sonoma County, each of us gets a 6-foot by 6-foot square plot to survive on year-round. So what does that mean? It means that we're increasingly relying on exports. My idea of sustainability is a place that can feed itself and being truly engaged with that process of food creation. So we're going to talk about greenhouse gases. We're going to talk about sea level rises. We're going to be talking about all these other issues. But I'm incredibly lucky today to be sharing the stage with three of my favorite people who are representatives of a real move in sustainable agriculture. So here we have Ariel Lucich, who manages Holistic Ag, which is a grazing operation that it moves around, actually, but as of right now, they're partnered with the Pepperwood Preserve right here in Sonoma County, doing some incredible restoration projects while grazing cattle, beef cattle. Next in, we have Albert Straus, who I'm sure everybody here in this room knows. This is the man who founded the very first certified organic dairy west of the Mississippi, and the very first certified organic creamery, which, thank you. So this is a man who was doing sustainable before sustainable was cool, and I'm incredibly blessed to have that depth of experience of really running an operation that has opened up doors. It wasn't following a trend, but really did open up the doors for so many others. And then last, but of course not least, I am lucky to also have Ariel Greenwood, who works with Aaron here up at Pepperwood with Holistic Ag. She also manages orchards over at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, who is a representative of the many young people getting into agriculture right now, brought to agriculture not because they were brought up with it, not because they inherited a farm or because that's what their dad did, but because they see a real opportunity to do something different and preserve and protect and enhance the foundation of our civilization, which is how do we feed ourselves and steward our land. So I think I've done quite enough talking, and I'm going to go ahead and start this conversation off with a question of what is sustainability. We've already heard earlier today about trying to define that word, and what does it mean? Are we using sustainable now? Are we using regenerative now? Are we using permaculture? What is the hot topic word? And if we want to talk about what's hot, let's ask the young people. So Ariel, I would love if you would start off and just let us know what does sustainability mean when it comes to agriculture?
I think that sustainability within agriculture, I can speak to what it has meant and has meant to me and probably some of my cohort. I think it's just this idea that sustainable agriculture is an agriculture that can continue throughout time going forward, which seems like kind of a benign sort of platform, but in fact, if you think about how destructive much of agriculture has been since the advent of agriculture, it's quite a radical idea that agriculture could be sustained. So that's my take on it.
And so I think what we hear a lot, especially when it comes to the consumer perspective, those who are not on the ground, we often have sort of these sort of reductive, simplistic ideas of what is the right thing to do, right? Almonds bad, kale good. Don't eat beef. This pesticide is approved and this pesticide is not approved. We have to have so many particles of carbon per million to reach a level of sustainability. Those are the metrics. And how do you, especially as someone who's working in the realm of what is probably the most controversial food product in America, which is beef.
I was gonna say, apples? Wait, other job, right?
How do you respond to that question of how can you possibly be sustainable if you're producing this product that has been labeled unsustainable?
We raise cattle within the confines of our bioregion. So that's generally what I say to folks who ask me such questions. How haven't you seen Cowspiracy? Haven't you heard it supposedly takes, I've heard, 1,200 to 20,000 gallons of water per pound of beef, to which I say, well, those numbers come from some beef in the world, but not our beef. Our company was started with not just sustainability on the mind, but with restoration on the mind. So, and we can, discuss our inputs and outputs. But basically, broadly speaking, I say learn the bioregion that you're eating and learn how to make good decisions for that. But I think it's also important to note that a lot of the statistics and cool, flashy infographics and whatnot that are generated to help inform consumers how to eat are drawn from things that lend themselves to measuring, which are often standardized, industrialized, commodified supply chains. And some of the best, most regenerative, dazzling farms and ranches in the world don't get counted. And so if you're making a decision based on something that you see circulating, your Facebook feed, the Sunday long read about how beef is bad again, then I would just ask yourself, what specifically is being measured, and is that the product that's actually available to me in my backyard in Northern California, where we have grassland and pastures that need to be grazed?
Thank you. So there's a team, I just learned there's an entire department program out at MIT that is spending millions of dollars working on these state-of-the-art technologies that are meant to pull carbon, CO2, out of the atmosphere and capture and reverse climate change. Albert, you didn't go to MIT, did you?
MIT? No, I'm Cal Poly.
Cal Poly. So what I hear is that you have another resource that is also sequestering carbon that happens to comprise just a resource that's available at this point in America, just under 1 billion acres in America, and that the byproduct of this technology that you're using to sequester carbon is ice cream, which I don't think the MIT scientists have figured out yet. So
What's the question?
how are you sequestering carbon?
How am I sequestering carbon? I actually wanted to talk a little bit about your idea that environmentalists and agriculture are at odds, and it's a new phenomenon, because when my mother started the Marine Agricultural Land Trust and different environmental organizations that I helped form and my parents did, it was to bring people together, environmentalists, ranchers, and governmental agencies, to be able to protect the land in agriculture and for the public. So it wasn't exclusive. There were differences of opinions, but they came together and worked together to make a community, a local agricultural community. So I think these are kind of new phenomenons where we're getting very very extreme views of how we should move forward as a society. But the way I look at agriculture and what we do on our farm and on the farms that supply us as a creamery in Marin Sonoma County is that how can we have a minimal impact on the land and produce the food that we are producing. So what we've done since 2004, actually I was going to, in 1980, under the first Brown administration, I was going to have a methane digester, taking all our animal waste and creating energy and also converting nutrients to be a better use for the land and the plants. The funding ran out the first time, but then in 2000 I was able to get part of the project going to start to capture the methane from our wastewater ponds, because we're not allowed to have any waste go into the streams or bodies of the state of California. And then in 2004 I started producing all our own energy, electricity, and capturing the heat off our generator to make hot water for washing equipment in a barn. So for the last 12 years we've been taking all the waste from our dairy when the animals are not on pasture, when they're in the corrals and in milking, and the waste from our creamery, and use it for producing energy and taking a greenhouse gas out of the atmosphere that's 23 times more detrimental to carbon dioxide, methane gas. So that's been our major effort in the last 12 years. But beyond that, what we're doing is we're part of the Marine Carbon Project, where we've we have a 20-year plan to sequester carbon into the soil through the growth of plants or pastures and different types of crops. So what we're doing is looking at sequestering 2,000 metric tons per year on our 500-acre farm, and that is through almost 1,600 of it is through the methane capture. The other 400 is through applying compost to the land, planting windbreak and hedgerows. What am I missing? And so there was, and also developing different water where animals can go graze. Animals are a very important part of that system because they graze the pastures, they allow it to regrow and get more growth on the pastures. We're also building carbon in the soil, but also organic matter in the soil that helps retain moisture, that helps plant more biomass being grown. So those are some of the things we're doing as far as that's good. There's more, but I'll have to stop there.
So, Aaron, you are grazing up at Pepperwood Preserve, which I was actually meeting with the director over there at the Pepperwood about a week ago, and one of the things she was saying was that a lot of times when people come to the preserve, this is a scientific-based natural preserve, and they show up and they see, suddenly they get there and there's this herd of cattle. And a lot of them are surprised and they think, why are there cattle grazing on what is supposed to be a nature preserve? What's the deal? Where is the synergy between what is supposed to be a preserve and allowing cattle to eat the grass?
Mm-hmm. Well, conservation can be a verb. I'm starting to refer to our cattle as wildlife. They're mammals, they're ruminants. And if you go to our website, there's a lot of obsession with Pleistocene ecosystems and the term megafauna. And so the Kool-Aid we're drinking, Albert drinks milk, and I drink his milk also. Our Kool-Aid is really about the fact that since the advent of agriculture, which occurred at the beginning of the Holocene, there hasn't been enough biodiversity on the landscape in North America, that's what that timeline represents, to manage the ecosystem. And so what we're doing, that conservation preserve already knew that they had to graze that land, that there was no way they could manage the biomass on that scale of property without bringing livestock in. There's not enough wildlife on the planet right now. The business model I started was focused on partnering with exactly those land bases. And I believe that there's infinite amount of land. I feel pretty strongly, if you don't want your land mistreated, don't charge people to graze it. It's a broken economic model. And so the thing is I think I look at the conservation world in particular, and I'm more frustrated with them than the negative livestock agriculturalists, because they're actually coming from a perspective of stewardship, and yet they're not active in that role. And so what we're doing is we're just providing the competency to add that layer of megafauna impact to the land base, which just means disturbance. If you want to sequester carbon, if you want a healthy soil system, photosynthesis has to occur, and the more cycling of that material, the more photosynthesis happens. And so it's a very new idea. People are talking about it a lot, but not really behind it. But Pepperwood is very, I think, advanced in this conversation, because I said, the conservation world says, bring the cattle in January and get them off by June. And so I keep asking, well, where, park systems and open space land, where are those cattle going? Where are we sending the cattle? Everyone wants them for the same period of time. When I approached Pepperwood, I said, I believe that this landscape needs these animals year-round, and we plan our grazing to cycle over the entire land base in a calendar year to the best of our ability. And it was their readiness to say, okay, we kind of trust you. It was my ability to kind of go in and improvise that relationship, because there's no model. Me coming into this in my 40s, 50s, I can't believe that the academic agricultural world hasn't figured all this out already, right? There are some, Albert went to Cal Poly, Bob Rutherford's been at it for a long time, but for the most part, sustainable agriculture, it is a term, and it's an emerging model. So I hope that made sense.
So, we've got a question. Yeah, we're also going to have some Q&A at the end, so we can get to questions. I'm sure there's plenty in the room. At this point, I wanted to ask about, because this is the Sustainable Enterprise Conference, and a lot of folks here are interested in how do we take these sustainability concepts and work them into a business model that is viable, provides jobs, and really is economically sustainable. That sort of triple bottom line economics. And my question to you guys at this point, and I'd love to hear from all of you, but especially from Albert, who has worked at this business for a long time, is what is the relationship between market-based solutions versus policies? So for instance, if we're talking about carbon sequestration, I could see potentially the next wave being a new label that is carbon negative beef, right? I mean, that could be a product at some point. But how far does the market, you have used the market in an incredible opportunity where consumers are really leading the charge by saying, this is what I want, I will spend the extra $1 or $2 to buy organics because it's what I believe in. So what is the relationship between the market solutions and then the policies that really need to be enacted to enable and incentivize the kind of work that you are doing to make sure that what you're doing doesn't remain a niche market, but really is able to go mainstream and more ranchers and dairies are able to enact it?
What do you mean a niche? 80% of the dairies in Sonoma County are certified organic. So I think that what I do is what I believe as a value to me, I hope is a value to everybody. We use reusable glass bottles for most of our milk. We try to get rid of plastics in our other products. Our yogurts, we've reduced the amount of plastics 3 times. We're about to go another 4th time, take out half more of the plastic. So those values are something that I hold really closely to. I'm just another example, water, which has always been a very scarce resource for us on Tomales Bay. There's no water table. So I've grown up my whole life without any real water supply. So when people are saying agriculture uses so much water, I can't grasp that. I mean, yes, we at the Creamery haul all our water in and all our wastewater out. So we're looking at reusing 90% of our water through our Creamery as well as our farm, and we're putting in systems to. We have one system that uses one cream separator that uses 5,000 gallons a day of water for cooling, and we've had to go through this to the Secretary of Agriculture to get the dairy inspectors to approve an idea in a system that came up with that to reuse that water, or just take 50 gallons of it and reuse it every day. But it wasn't in the dairy laws. So the ideas of sustainability ingrained in what I'm doing is my feeling is what real business and a viable business model, and hopefully producing a high quality product that consumers enjoy, understand, and value the sustainability efforts that we do, and having a minimal impact, and encouraging those types of businesses in the communities that we have. We're trying to create a model here that can be replicated other places. We don't try to sell our products nationally. We try to create a regional model that other people can replicate and have. And so I think that might answer your question, but I'm not sure.
Sure. Yeah. And your business, Aaron, is a little more new.
Yeah.
And you're probably just beginning to enter into the market. And how do you see that message, the philosophy behind what you do, and the real practice translating to a value add that's going to allow you to continue to do what you do in a viable way that provides you and Ariel, in this case, a livelihood and the ability to continue your operation? What's really going to be required of the market or the context in which you work?
For me, it's not. I like how all that sounds. That's not really in the DNA of the business model. The DNA of the business model is about creating an alternative to conventional beef operation, and it's based on grass. It's a zero input system. You know, if we have to feed hay, if we get stuck, we will get hay, but there's no hay in the model. It's purely pasture. So for me, it was more. I agree with Albert. You know, it's not a niche anymore. It makes long-term economic sense. And I also want to say Albert isn't a niche. Albert makes superlative products also. I mean, I think the strength of that brand is in the recipes that he makes as well. But yes, is there an advantage to saying we sequester carbon through the blah, 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 5 minutes. But really, I modeled the business because I became convinced that the only game in town is photosynthesis, you know, and being involved in, I had come to this as a filmmaker and then got to the point where I was like, if I don't do this, I'm a fraud. I built a business model so that I could enter that market. That model was built to survive a future economy, and perform in the current, you know. But the point is that this notion of sustainable agriculture, we have to get rid of it. We have to call that agriculture, and assume that these other things, the input costs for a conventional beef cow-calf operator are high. Yeah. I mean, they're feeding hay 5-6 months. Our neighbors are feeding hay year-round now in the last couple of years. This year they might be okay, but they didn't grow grass because they're continuous grazing. So they're really grazing everything as soon as it happens. And with the significant drought over the last few years, they never got that spring flush. And so they're trucking in hay. I don't have that cost, and I still am within the AUM of kind of the conventional guys that do large cow-calves. So I modeled the business specifically to do that based on the more aggressive stewardship models, primarily the work of Alan Savory. Mm-hmm. So I think it's great to be able to have a market advantage. We certainly will use that. I think grass-fed is more important, that we really understand that what the animal eats translates into its fat, and primarily its fats. So we're constantly striving to do a healthier product, because it's what is making my children's cells. But I want to kind of go beyond a niche and marketing hype and just say this should be business as usual, mm-hmm. and that's how we started. I mean, on the shoulders of people like Albert, the legacy of his family, but also he comes from Cal Poly.
I don't come from Cal.
He's educated in traditional agricultural. Go ahead.
If you have limited time, you wanted to talk about next generation?
I did, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I mean, there's so many things we could talk about today, but one of the things I did really want to explore today was the challenges of taking the legacy of agriculture and being able to pass it down to that next generation. We have, like I said, the average age of the American farmer continues to rise. The number of farms, the number of family farms continues to disappear and conglomerate. Cost of inputs and cost of overhead to get started, including the regulatory environment, have changed so much over the past several decades. What are the challenges and then what are the opportunities for young people to get into agriculture, and not simply as idealistic apprentices, but truly take it on as either being able to succeed another person's business or start their own entrepreneurial enterprise that can really thrive? Albert?
Thanks. That's specifically the issue that we've been working on, and I've been working on, is succession and next generation of farmers. I think we've been able to stabilize and make farming more viable by organic, in our dairy section anyway. But how do you get the next generation? 1 minute, wow. So I'll have to talk through the minute.
It's okay.
So what we're looking at is the New Zealand model of succession, where they have ways of going through, they've institutionalized a way to have people working on farms and then different types of equity acquisition through that program. And also working with the universities to get an educational program, not only in the universities, but also in the high schools and junior colleges, to start teaching agriculture again and technical skills, which have been falling off. Not everybody goes to university. So those are type of things that I think is vital to the next generation and our communities. How do we get communities where people can live and work in the communities, afford the housing? In our area, speculation on short-term rentals is rampant, where in Marshall, less than 30% of the houses are being lived in full-time. So how do you make policy changes? How do you make opportunities for the next generation? So that's what we're working on.
Yeah, I know we just have a few seconds, but to build on that, I moved to Sonoma County looking for a herd to work with, which I found, and not only did that become my vocation, but also my place of residence. And were it not for that, I don't know, if any of you have looked for housing leases in Sonoma County lately. If you are, you're probably still looking, because it's very hard. And I will say, I have no shortage of work opportunities in the area if I wanted to take on more work. The challenge for myself and pretty much everybody else that I talked to who was working in specifically sustainable agriculture is just finding a place to lay their pallet at the end of the day, and maybe you'll find a place that is $800 a month for a room, but you're driving 30 minutes to your land base, and it's really hard to grow vegetables or raise animals when you have to commute that far. So I think you can tell a lot about the priorities of a city or a county based on whether or not the people that steward its landscapes and grow its food can even find square footage to live on, at just a place to cook their meals and get a good night's sleep. So that's just something that I felt needed to be said.
Yeah. It's incredibly challenging to have sustainable agriculture when the farmers can't sustain themselves, especially when you're talking about that next generation and the younger folks coming in. So I think we only have a little bit more time, but I do want to have an opportunity to engage with the audience. I'm sure there's plenty of questions, and we'll go ahead and start with you over here.
So I was wondering, if we take your model of grass-feed beef and we would scale it to the consumption of beef in California, do you feel that model would be sustainable? Means, like, from the perspective of how much land we are using for growing meat, or do you think we have to actually scale back our beef production in order to make that actually sustainable?
So the question was, is the practice that you're using to produce, to raise cattle and produce beef, or in Albert's case, dairy, is if you were to do it in the way that they're doing it, can you still meet the demands of current consumption patterns of beef in California?
I actually think we need to reevaluate our definition and expectation of the market. So the market, in our current economic mindset, demand defines the market. No, production should define the market, right? So when people throw this at me.
And production, by the way, is your ecology.
Yeah. You cannot, when, again, we talk about sustainability, well, it's just how my quest, when I went out to look, I went out to see, does sustainable agriculture exist, right? And the point is that if your system is removing the resources required to continue to operate that system, it's got a trajectory. And so this debate over, well, can that supply the amount of beef? Well, the point is if it can't, then that's the amount of beef that we should be consuming. Albert has no shortage of demand. Do you get that? Like that?
What you're saying is we should scale that model maybe to California, but at the same time we have to project our consumption down in order to be more sustainable.
It's consuming the right stuff, right? And
It's out of season.
the way that things scale is in large part through the market supporting it. So it's not a matter of people eating less beef, or it's the right stuff. That's how things grow. So if it's not enough to say people should eat less beef. It's the kind of beef that they're eating. I would love if we sold out.
The right stuff. We all, eat the beef you're growing. Right? Let's say we try to scale. My question is, do you think we can sustain that? If we all would eat that kind of meat.
I think that the upper end of ecological performance relative to livestock agriculture is science fiction to what our expectation is right now. I think that what's going on the planet right now in terms of aggressive, particularly holistic management kind of grazing models is scratching the surface of how functional our ecosystem can be and was. Breck Parkman's speaking soon. You should go listen to the state archaeologists talk about the herds that roamed here 11,000 years ago. And here's the point, they calculate how many prey animals were here because of how many predators they find. Well, what I like to say is you see these pictures of mammoth and mastodon in grass like that out there. That wasn't the grass that was here. That was not the amount of herbivory that occurred on the entire continent within the fairly stable 2.5 million years of the Pleistocene. We don't know what that looks like. And so my point is I don't care if we can make enough beef. My children have never tasted a McDonald's hamburger. So as far as I'm concerned, that's not meat. And it can go wherever it wants to go. But if we change this notion that if there's demand, we have to fill it, regardless of the outcome and the entropy of that system, I think we'll have an answer to what you're asking for.
How about you, Albert?
Well, I just think we need to get back to a more balanced system between what we're eating and what we're producing. We seem to be restricting agriculture in the United States, or making it less and less farmers, less and less production, and relying on imports out of season, like New Zealand meat, dairy, and things from South America and all over the world. How can we get back to a basic balanced system that the balancing climate change, the climate change that we have, the big footprint that we have in this society? How can we get back to a more balanced way? I think part of it is pasture raised and pasture beef, as well as looking at the resource in dairy, I can say we're trying to balance the amount of utilizing pasture and bringing the supplemented feeds closer to home so that we're not importing stuff from China or Brazil or Eastern Europe to feed, because there's no one can produce organic grains in the United States because it's all GMO. So how can we get back to a more balanced society?
Yeah.
I was just in a meeting around ecotourism, and I was reading an article in New York Times last week about because of overpopulation and technology, we're going to come into an economy where we're actually not working because we don't need to work. There's going to be more automation and more people. And so I'm thinking about the agricultural industry. I'm thinking about the new generation getting out of college with no jobs, no possibility of owning land. And really what we need to do to survive in our lives is land and food, housing and food. And I'm wondering what the agricultural community is doing to assure that our future generation is able to do those things. And are you guys aware of that in your business practices? Not only of stewardship of animals, of stewardship of land, but also the stewardship of the social infrastructures that rely on food.
I've got a few thoughts. That was a very good, but also very expansive question. But it's good. Agricultural community is definitely aware of it. I would say that because agriculture produces products that are bought on the market. Again, I'm not a pure free market capitalist by any means, but the grazers in the North Bay often lament that they can't find people who either know how to graze animals sensitively the way that we do, or they can't find people willing to learn it. So it's sort of a chicken and egg thing where if there's not enough support for people who are doing sensitive restorative grazing, there's not enough surplus funds to hire people who can help grow that company to graze more land. But also, I think, especially a lot of people in my generation are only now catching on to opportunities in agriculture to where they can begin to see that as a vocational career trajectory. So it's a total chicken and egg thing, but the way to accelerate that is for companies that are producing regenerative products to find the market support that they need. So producers are operating on wicked thin margins and often do their work out of altruism and benevolence and deep affection for the landscape. So obviously don't have a super clear answer to your question, but I've been at this since I was 16 and have never had any shortage of opportunity. It's mostly a matter of in a given region, let's say I wanted to work in Sonoma County for the rest of my life, is there enough support for those products in that area?
I like to add something to it. We're part of the Greenwood conference next week, the true cost of American food, and looking at what it really costs to produce food with externalities, the pluses and minuses of carbon sequestering, pesticides on the other end is a negative. So how does it equate to, in our case, a gallon of milk? So 4 of our dairies have been part of this survey. But what I've tried to do is make a sustainable model of farming so that farmers actually paying themselves what it would cost to hire someone else to manage their business. I don't feel I've accomplished our goal until people can pay themselves what they're worth in the business. Even the most successful farmers to date don't pay themselves. Some of the older ones rely on Social Security. So why would the next generation even want to come back to a farm? So that's what unless we get a sustainable model of farming, we're not going to have a next generation. So we can talk all we want, but why would people go to school in agriculture? Why would they work in agriculture if there's no future? So that's where that's what we're working on and trying to concentrate on. Thank you.
So I think we have time for one more question here. So how about there in the back? Oh, two more? Two more.
Thank you. Earlier, the gentleman, you mentioned AUMs as an acronym. What does that stand for with?
It's relative to how much land is required to carry one unit, which is either an adult cow. It's 1,000 pounds of cow. It's either an adult cow or a cow-calf pair.
And you said
Animal unit month.
Okay, appreciate that. And just to go on to Mr. Straus's remarks, with externalities, I appreciate that term. How do you enforce that, or how do you get that into the true cost? Because right now they're just being ignored. It's not my cost, not my problem.
So that's what this conference is about. There's Patrick Holden from the UK, the Sustainable Food Trust, and we've gotten a international expert in ecosystem services from Australia that's been doing the surveys and the studies on 3 different farming models.
Would that be a role for government to play then, or not?
First they have to, the model has to be first recognized and be able to say this is a model that makes sense, and then who takes it over is, we want to look at it. I want to use it for myself. If my methane digester actually has this much effect on a gallon of milk, maybe that's an opportunity for getting other farms to put digesters in. Carbon farming, same thing. So how can we quantify these different practices and use them as goals, benchmarking goals?
Who's funding that work, though?
Which work?
The research that's being done to actually.
It's a Sustainable Food Trust right now.
Sustainable Food Trust. So yeah, I think government has a role to play in funding the research we all need to show that these emergent things are working. That's a big bottleneck. It's a big bottleneck for us because we're running against the existing scientific community saying it doesn't work.
And we do have government programs that provide millions and millions of dollars of research funds to we had a mechanical tomato harvester back in the 70s that was funded by the UC system to encourage scaling up through mechanization. Those same kind of funds that are going towards the kind of technologies that ultimately only really support larger farms that can afford that kind of overhead. Those same funds could be funneled more towards research that really allows for measurable impacts when it comes to things like carbon farming. Yeah. And there are a lot of things in Jerry Brown's proposed budget. There are many tens of millions of dollars allocated for, it's not approved yet, but tens of millions of dollars have allocated for the Healthy Soils Program, water retention, land preservation, and including methane digesters. So there is definitely a role to play for government. So we're going to have one last question, and then I really do encourage you guys to talk with each other afterwards.
We've got a booth.
Yeah, there's a booth here, so go chat with them, continue the conversation. But I think we had one more question, final question here.
You're bringing the mic, man?
About the compatibility or the conflict, depending on your point of view, concerning ag on open space, publicly owned open space, protected open space. And I'm wondering if either you or your panel can weigh in on that topic.
So just for a little background, I was hoping to actually bring this up, and then we ran out of time. So I appreciate you being able to give me the conclusion I wanted. So just for the background, right here in Rohnert Park, there is a proposed incubator farm. An incubator farm is essentially an educational opportunity for beginning farmers to access small parcels of land to begin their businesses on. So it essentially allows them to, instead of taking that huge risk and leasing or buying land in a place like Sonoma County where it's incredibly cost prohibitive, it allows them to take on a piece of land and grow their business, not as a community garden, not as some little side project, but as a real enterprise where they can actually develop their marketing, they can develop their skills, they can really start maybe investing in some infrastructure that they could take with them. And then when they're ready, maybe in a few years after that, they're able to then move on to another piece of property where they could lease maybe a larger parcel. That's the idea behind the incubator farm. It's a project in collaboration between the UC Extension office and and again, very important, people refer to it as the Open Space District. I'm sure everybody here has heard of the Open Space District, but the actual name is the Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, in whose mission is to preserve agriculture in addition to open space. And not only in addition to open space, but that agriculture is open space. Most of the open space that we have here in Sonoma County has been preserved by way of agriculture. The things that have been keeping, no offense to anyone here from San Jose, but what has kept Sonoma County from looking like San Jose is the viability of working lands, as well as the preservation of land trusts, open space, green belts, parks. So currently under the purview of the Open Space District, the Agricultural Preservation Open Space District, the land that's currently here owned by them next to Roanoke Park, it's absolutely under their purview to be able to lease that property out to agriculture of any kind, so long as it's not development. What was sold was the development rights, the easements that were sold. So there will never ever be a shopping mall there. There will never be a subdivision there. There will never be houses there. But agriculture is certainly allowable. So unfortunately, well, in my opinion, unfortunately, the Roanoke Park City Council voted to oppose it. It's now gone back to the county to determine whether or not they're going to go forward with it or find some sort of compromise. But as of right now, it's all in flux whether or not we do have this incubator farm happen or not. And Ariel?
Can I just say it's a very particular form of NIMBYism when you don't want biodiverse, sustainable farms cropping up in your backyard. I don't know if you've been to one lately, but they're kind of beautiful. There's like always flowers and butterflies, and they play a lot of important ecosystem services. And just to get minorly philosophical for a second, just so Aaron doesn't have to just go around, we can, I mean, at the end of the day, even in our dresses and our suits and things, we're all human animals. We're animals that need sustenance. And I think a county that is inhospitable to the procurement of healthy food is, frankly, inhabitable. So just to kind of put it in perspective, I also wanted to say I think it's funny that we're all three ranchers of some stripe up here, yet the only one in boots is Evan over there. Northern California.
Real deermen wear Birkenstocks.
There you go.
All right.
That's all I got.
Don't have to dress in my third grade Halloween costume to raise livestock.
So, you got anything to add to that one?
That's it.
So, it's up. I encourage you guys to all look into the issue. Go explore the Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District's website to find out what it was that Sonoma County voters created 20 years ago, and what its mission is, what it has accomplished, and what I think is an incredible service to making Sonoma County this incredible, beautiful, bountiful place that we all call home. So I'm proud to have it here, and I hope it continues to do its work. Thank you so much to our panelists. And go forth and eat well.